The Good Citizens Podcast.
But all right, Doc, getting back to something you said in your opening, the vaccine. You got vaccinated. I know we were joking a little bit about that, but tell us a little bit about that. How was it? How you feeling? Should people get it? What do you think? What are your thoughts on it? And
how's it feel to know you're getting tracked now?
You are funny with that one.
You twitching over there, Doc?
No, actually, I feel completely fine. So I got the Pfizer vaccine. And, you know, there's two, just in case you were wondering. There's a Moderna one. There's a Pfizer one. They're pretty much, everybody asks me, like, which one do you prefer? I don't have a preference. You know, the Pfizer one dropped first, and then the Moderna came out. They both have emergency authorization use. So they're still, you know, at the kind of earlier stages in terms of the numbers. But the Pfizer study had like over 40,000 people in it. And I felt very comfortable getting that vaccine. Looking at the side effect profile, I felt like I felt after any other shot. So it just made my arm sore was really the only thing. At first, I thought it made me really drowsy, but I realized that was because I had just got off a night shift. And so, you know, after the Pfizer shot, you have to wait 3 weeks to get a second dose, which is basically a booster. So after the first dose, you're at about 50% immunity. And then after the second dose, that brings you up to essentially like 96% immunity. The Moderna vaccine, pretty much the same thing, except for you have to wait 4 weeks after the first dose, and it brings you to essentially 0.5% less than the Pfizer one. So that's what people ask, but essentially it's the same efficacy and the same side effect profile. They're both mRNA vaccines, so they essentially work the same way. And what that means is that the vaccines pretty much introduce like a message which tells your cells to produce a specific protein, which then is essentially the same as the spike protein from the COVID virus. And then your body generates antibodies to that. So the technology is great because it has the chance to be used if there's continued, you know, mutations and variants of the COVID virus that come out. It allows us to quickly create a new vaccine. So a lot of people are worried about, should I get it if there's these new mutations? And I would say absolutely yes. I say if you feel hesitancy about getting the vaccine, then you should wait until you do your research and talk to people that you trust to advise you in regards to whether it's for you or not. But for me, just working in the emergency room, I felt like the benefits outweighed the risk for me to get the vaccination, as well as the people that I live with and that I'm around. You know, I help with my grandma. You know, my mom is older, so I just wanted to make sure that they were predominantly protected as well. So both my parents, my grandmother, they all are vaccinated as well.
So you don't have any concerns over the long-term effects of it, over a vaccine that was created so fast when there's, you know, when they say most vaccines take, years to develop?
I mean, we say that, but we think about the fact that... I
mean, is that true or not? That most vaccines take like multiple years to develop?
So it is. The issue is that, you know, this is the one time in history we can look at where pretty much every major pharmaceutical biotechnology company was working on the same goal at the same time, even collaborating, right? Sharing data, sharing evidence in order to come up with a vaccine. So I think if you look at it that way, like it still took we've been in this pandemic since like March. I mean, it
took less than a year. It
took less than a year, but it still took a while. And they actually stopped one of the trials early because it was so effective. But, you know, essentially they tested it on tens of thousands of people, which is actually more than typical vaccines would because of the short duration of time. So, yeah, I mean, years down the line, there's a chance that you could find side effects that we aren't really aware of. But I don't think they'd be outside the realm of any other vaccine. I think the majority of them we're going to see within a short period of time, which is what we've already noticed.
What is that? Like,
so like they ask if you've ever had any anaphylaxis type reactions. I think we've seen that essentially that's the main one. And so some people get it and then they essentially have a life-threatening allergic reaction.
You said anaphylaxis?
Anaphylaxis. An allergic reaction that can kill you. You stop breathing.
Yeah, that's a med school word.
You stop breathing. But then other than that, it's like, there was also concern, I believe it was in Norway, there was like 23 elderly individuals from nursing homes that died after getting, was that the Pfizer vaccine? And people were concerned about that. Like, well, maybe we should hold off giving it to the very elderly, individuals. Well, the other issue with giving it to people in nursing homes is, I don't know if you've seen the condition of patients in nursing homes, but it's terrible. And it's why, like, I would never want to send my grandparent or anyone there if I didn't have to. Now, obviously, if there's like a level of care you can't do at home, it's different. But it's just like, it's not the greatest place because you have to think about the amount of staff they have to take care of the amount of patients they have. So it's very easy for, say, someone with dementia that doesn't eat or drink well already. Like, the staff there is not going to spoon feed them and make sure they eat every day. So they get dehydrated. They're prone to more severe reactions from illness. So those patients are just extremely vulnerable to begin with. So when they got the vaccine, simple side effects like a little nausea, a little diarrhea, even constipation is like life-threatening for them.
Do you think that you think there's a push to maybe not disclose some of the life-threatening side effects of the virus, like in order to push and encourage everyone to get of the vaccine, in order to push and encourage everyone to get the vaccine?
I don't think there's been any suppression. If anything, I think the media machine that is, social media and the internet today, like, I feel like things come out a lot sooner. Like, it's kind of hard to damage control in today's society because everything gets so widely spread so quickly. Are
there people that are dying, like, from the vaccine?
So the case I gave you is pretty much the only people who have died. Okay. There was also a physician who had a reaction where his platelets, which are the cells that form clots in your body, so his platelets got severely low. So when they get to a certain point, you actually start to have spontaneous bleeds. And he had a spontaneous bleed in his head, which is a hemorrhagic stroke. Gotcha. So in his case, though, I think that the issue is that there are many people, and as a physician, like, we're a lot of us feel like we're smart enough to diagnose ourselves if there's any issues. Like, a lot of us feel like, I don't have to go to a doctor, I am a doctor. And so a lot of times we're the worst with keeping up with health maintenance. And I have to I have to make sure I stay on top of it, because if I get a little bit lax, like, I'll look back and be like, oh, I haven't done this for 2 years. And so if you haven't had something like a simple annual blood draw, like, he doesn't know if his platelets were low before he got the vaccine.
All right.
So you have to think, like, there are conditions that are going to exist before the vaccine, and they are going to be for sure exacerbated after you get a vaccine, which is a stress on your immune system, which is the same reason why certain people can't get the shingles vaccine. Like, there are live vaccines already now that are standard. And if you don't fill out that questionnaire right, you can have a serious life-threatening side effect or reaction to that vaccination. But that's why it's important to be well informed and take your time. There's no rush. And that's what I tell people. Like, if you have any hesitancy regarding getting the COVID-19 vaccine, then you should wait until you feel like all your questions are answered. But again, for me, being around COVID every day, obviously I'm wearing PPE. I didn't develop one single antibody. And I'm looking at that. I got antibody tested before I got the vaccine because I just wanted to know. And I was sure I had COVID at some point, I'm like, I have to have had it, being in such close proximity to it so frequently. Not one single antibody. So I'm like, at this point, now seeing my colleagues and friends in the medical industry that have actually become very severely ill from this virus, and have had like prolonged side effects, and for me it was just like, yeah, I have to get the vaccine because I don't want to be that person.
That doesn't make you think, though, the fact that you, like you say, you work in such close proximity with the virus and you haven't had it at all up to this point, that doesn't make you think that maybe some people just maybe naturally immune to it and just
I mean
aren't going to catch it regardless?
I don't think,
because that seems crazy to me that you work in these hospitals and around all these COVID patients. I mean, not just you, anybody who works in the hospital right now.
I think you're hyper vigilant when you're in a setting where it's all around you, right? I don't drink. I go an entire shift. I don't take a sip of water. I don't take my mask off unless I go back to the bathroom. Like, I have very strict protocol when I'm at work now, which I never followed before. And I haven't gotten sick at all. Like, and it's so, you know what, this makes me think about all the people who are like, well, what happened to the flu, the conspiracy theorists. I'm like, well, there's never been a time in history where everyone pretty much is wearing masks, washing their hands, and sanitizing frequently. Like, we're so much more vigilant that, yeah, the flu incidents did go down, but it went down because people are not being nasty anymore, you know, because we're so worried about COVID. Right. And so we've seen that, like, everything, the incidence has gone down. Not to mention the fact that kids haven't been in school and they are like cesspools. They spread disease like wildfire. So I think like those are two huge aspects to why we're just not seeing those common illnesses that we normally would see as you know, at such an increased prevalence. We're not seeing them as much. But COVID, I mean, every time I keep, you know, with this recent spike saying, oh, it's getting better, like I go back the next day and then I'm like, okay, it got crazy again. So, yeah. I mean, it's still there. But I more than anything, I just want people to know that, you know, there's the initial illness, and a lot of people like to say, oh, it's just like the flu. But we were talking about that Florida, you know, college basketball player that collapsed while he was playing. And I think like it's important that people know like the severe parts of COVID, like the severe complications that are long term. And not only, you know, cardiomyopathies, meaning heart disease or symptoms of heart failure, but there's patients that are having long-term lung disease, symptoms of severe asthma that they really never had any history of, breathing problems. They can't, you know, there's prolonged fatigue. And then I was reading a study today even about forming autoantibodies, where your immune system essentially in reaction to the virus starts to attack itself long-term. So you can start to get kidney and other organ failure. So it's like it's deeper than just like having a flu-like illness for a short period of time.
And I think it can be overstated too. I was reading something that said that 2020 may have the official numbers haven't been tallied, but it may have the highest death rate since like 1949 or something like that.
Absolutely. And a lot of people initially were trying to say that the death rate hasn't changed. But the crazy part is, like, especially out here in LA, our death total for sure, if you work at a county hospital now, if you can drive by LA County Hospital and see outdoor freezers. Right? Yeah. You know why? Because the morgue is full. The county hospital, the most busy hospital in our state, pretty much.
Yeah, they lowered their regulations for cremation because there was some regulation on how many bodies could be cremated at a time because the people have feelings and the mercury or something gets in the air and it's toxic, but they lowered it because they have so many bodies to cremate, deal with. Right? I heard that.
That's absolutely true.
No matter what you believe or don't believe about the virus, you can't deny that there's something out here killing a lot of people. So
sure.
Yeah,
I don't know. I go back and forth between, like, when it's all first, I was super nervous. Cause like you said, I got asthma, so I'm kind of like high risk if I was to catch it, and knock on wood, it would get like really severe. But so I go back and forth between being like real vigilant about it, being real cautious and kind of nervous about it. And then at the same time, sometimes I think about it, is like, man, I've been this place, I've been that place, I've been around, like, my girl works in the hospital, I've been around you work in the hospital. Like, I feel like I've been around enough people to where it's like, I don't know, I feel like I would have been exposed by now. I got family that works in airports that I'm around. So it's like, I don't know. Like I said, it's just, I don't think any of us really know what to really.
And I think it's like, it's not virus. Even just a lot of times being like in close proximity to those people too, but it's like the certain habits that you might have when you're around them.
Like I had an uncle. The aunt caught it and my uncle didn't, and they.
Or he was asymptomatic, right? We know that. So the big thing with COVID,
I mean, they both got tested. He tested when she tested positive. He tested negative.
Or he gave it to her and then he was negative. You never. That's the thing. You don't know about the actual like time sequence of things, so it's always hard to tell. But it's highly contagious. So most times, more often than not, like if he was to get like antibody tested, he probably got antibodies because he probably had it at some point in time. It really is highly contagious. But it's more when there's active disease, like the asymptomatic transmission is not as high as we thought it was. But it is about proximity and the habits when you're around people is what I would say for sure. But we shouldn't live in fear. Like, I wouldn't advise that, but we should proceed with caution and be vigilant and there are things that we know help, and there's easy things. So if you're not going to like socially distance and avoid crowds, like, well, at minimum, you need to be making sure your vitamin C, your vitamin D, your zinc, and all that are on point. Yeah. And that you're active, that you're staying healthy.
My sea moss is going.
That's high in vitamin C. But you
don't believe in holistic medicine?
I do believe in holistic. I literally just told you about some holistic medicine.
You believe Dr. Sebi cure AIDS?
I believe it's possible. Imagine got a cure, then Dr. Sebi might got a cure too.
Had answers.
He might have a cure.
Well, I think anybody that was listening to that definitely feels smarter, because I feel smarter just from listening to that. So I appreciate you being able to tell us a little bit about that. And
how you feel about the vaccine?
Do
you trust it?
Actually, I want to.
If it was available to you right now, would you? Would you go voluntarily go get it?
I would do it just because of the season, like, because of the sport, and if somebody gets it, we shut down. So,
and basketball is one of those sports too, where when one person gets sick, everybody does. So I could see like that would make sense to me for some to get the vaccine. I don't necessarily think everybody needs to rush out and go get it. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I do think that at some point that you're going to see this become very similar to any other routine vaccine, where
it's definitely you're going to
it's going to head, especially if we see that, because our quarantine anniversary is coming up. Okay, this COVID anniversary is coming up, and if anything, it's only, at least in LA for sure, it hasn't gone anywhere. It's only gotten more prevalent. So we're going to see this become necessary for us to resume life, which is for your kids to go to school. Like, would you let Sky get the vaccine to go to school, or like, what are you going to do if they say it's mandatory? It's now on the the list of mandatory vaccines.
Honestly, that's something I'm still like processing, trying to figure out. Like, I'm kind of on the fence about it, because I don't trust it just because it's so new, and I feel like we. So you need more time. I feel like we're not going to know the long-term effects of it for years from now. So it's like. But at the same time,
what if you lived during like a smallpox epidemic? You know what I'm saying? Like, when that vaccine. But here's the thing: if you lived at that time and you're seeing like people die from a disease, and someone says, "Hey, I got a new vaccine for it," like the same thing happened then, and that was revolutionary.
Yeah, I mean, you could be right, but I'm still trying. I'm on the fence about it. More than likely, yeah, because I wouldn't want her to miss out on that school experience. I believe these kids are going to suffer like socially from this whole homeschooling thing.
Absolutely.
A lot of parents feel like they have it under control, which a lot of them may, but these kids are missing that social experience.
And the issue with kids too is like, so most kids do just fine after having a COVID infection, because initially there was thoughts of like, just let them go to school and get it. Because they do fine with it. But the issue was then they found out that there's this post-inflammatory syndrome where they get multi-organ failure. So like kidneys, liver, all the coagulation, all that starts to fail. And the heart.
They can pass it to.
And they can pass it to other people. But there was a thought like, well, maybe we should just let them go to school, because people need to get back to work and the economy, and and they're unfortunately not getting the same social experience that they normally would get. But then once they realized this, it was like, well, no, because this is like, that's something that can debilitate a child for life. Like, your kidneys fail, like, and they didn't have to.
How you feel about the vaccine?
Yeah, would you get the vaccine?
I'm gonna wait. When is
the time that you would feel okay getting it?
It's probably at least a few years.
Really?
Yeah. For me personally, I feel like the risk of getting it right now, I know it would probably sound bad to say it, but I feel like I would rather risk dealing with COVID than potential long-term risk of the vaccine right now. Just because I feel like I'm healthy enough to get through it, but I know, and I'm not advocating, like, I get it, like some people that,
and that's a reasonable rationale.
Yeah, no, you entitled to feel that way.
Yeah, I'm just not like, I know there are healthy people that have gotten it and have suffered, who kept in great shape and eat healthy and all that stuff like that. But that's just the way I feel. And I've read, like, I've tried to research. I'm not a doctor, so a lot of this stuff is over my head for sure. But I actually appreciate your insight a lot because
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's very balanced and reasonable. And I think it's, it's very useful, but, yeah, I mean,
I guess the thing is like anything that's revolutionary or, like has the type of like massive effect on the world as a COVID vaccine would, like there's always going to be the skeptics, right?
Right.
And for anything to really move like in history to like actually create like a real change, like you kind of have to be like a risk taker. You kind of have to step out there and say like, I'll go ahead and take it. And again, my thing was just this, like I am around older people, right? So there's like it's the vulnerable people as well. Like, of course they need the vaccine. Again, if someone younger feels like I want to take the risk, I'd rather deal with COVID, then that's fine. What actually changed, because I was actually going to wait for the vaccine. Mm-hmm. And what changed my mind was actually my favorite respiratory therapist in our hospital caught COVID. And he was in the hospital from, and I actually asked him if I could share his story, but he was in the hospital from like a week before Christmas until he just got the hospital last week. He spent like over a month in the hospital. He's the same age. He's in his 30s, early 30s. He's young. He's otherwise fit and healthy. He's never, to his knowledge, had any lung disease, any of that. And he literally just like, I went to go see him and he like could not talk to me. And he tried, he was young, so I could tell he was trying to look like he was like good, but he could barely say one word to me. So I literally was just like, don't talk. Like, let me just examine you. I'm like, here's some stuff to keep you occupied. Like, but I would go to see him after my shift, like every day. And I'm just like watching the way that hit him. It hit me differently. And I know there's a lot of people out there that like once it hits like their loved one, their elderly family member or whoever else that it makes them go to the hospital. That's when it changes. And that is kind of what I expected, the vulnerable populations. But when you start seeing like 30-year-olds, like it hits different. And the longer this pandemic has been going on, is I'm starting to be more exposed to the other complications of COVID, the post effects. And that's what makes me say it's not worth it for somebody in their 30s to now have to deal with things like these issues that don't hit people till their 70s. Like so for me, that's why I said the vaccine, I'm going to take it. And again, if people don't want to take it, I think that's fine. But then the utmost vigilance is required because this is really contagious. And people, everybody's like, I'm just going to live life until they infect somebody else that they love and care about. And then that's when we kind of like, that's when it all of a sudden hits home. So just be careful, be vigilant. But either way, I think the vaccine, the technology being there is great. And I think with time, we'll see.
I mean, we like E said, I mean, we appreciate your perspective and your insight because I mean it's important for people who look like us to hear that from people who look like us. You feel me? Because I mean, black folks already don't trust the government,
as we should not.
Don't trust, the healthcare that we often get in this country. So
absolutely. I
mean, it's important for you to share your insight and give us some game on all that.
And we need to have more conversations about that because it's like. I mean, even if you look at the numbers, like when I took my mother and grandmother to get vaccinated, like, you know who I saw?
Who?
Who was out there? People. Yeah. In just droves. Like it was like packed. Wealthy white people because it was a drive-through and all I saw was Benzes, Audis, Porsches, like
white people.
So my point being like the mistrust that African Americans have with the medical and scientific community is warranted, right? We got Henrietta Lacks, right? She pretty much was experimented on for the purposes of OB-GYN. Like you have the Tuskegee experiment, like where they injected us with syphilis. So like we know like throughout history that has been the case. And so the mistrust is warranted, but at the same time, like when I look and I see that the Caucasian community is emphatically out there getting vaccinated, especially when they're worried right now about their population declining, like it says something to me. It says like we're the ones dying from this, and right now there's health